Welcome to Your Life Matters, Soul Connection podcast with your host, none other than Junie Swadron. And today I am absolutely delighted to welcome my friend, my colleague, Lawrence Cooper. Hello, Lawrence.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's just absolutely a pleasure, Lawrence. So before we go into our conversation together, I'm just going to let everybody know a little bit about your background. So Lawrence J.W. Cooper is the poet laureate of the Comox Valley. He is a published author. He's published 3 books of poetry. His latest book, Enchanted with Life, is a collection of poems based on living a life that he truly, truly loves to live in beautiful Fanny Bay on Baines Sound, where the sea meets the mountains and the mountains meet the sky. And this is in beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada. He's also written a series of self-actualization involving grounding and centering videos with activities on how to shape a life filled with peace, joy, and love. And Lawrence is one who can speak very, very truly from his heart and his experience of life in this way, because he has gone the gamut to know the truth of how to shape a life filled with peace, joy, and love. Would that be true, Lawrence?
Absolutely. Absolutely true. I have, unfortunately, but fortunately, run the gamut.
Well, I think it's probably a good thing for those of us who need to know what's possible when you have run the gamut, when you haven't been in this place of loving your life in the way in which you've come to know that, and for people to know how you got there. How, in fact, did you move from that place of perhaps feeling hopeless and not living a life that you would truly be wanting to live. So let me take you back before we go into where you are today and the many different publications that you've had and the poetry that you write and becoming the poet laureate for this huge area on Vancouver Island, the Comox Valley. Tell us a little bit about what got you started, number one, as a writer, as a poet. I don't even think I mentioned that you're also a psychologist. So give us some background, if you will.
What got me started? It goes back, it's counting the years, 60 years. 10 years old when I started writing. And I was always a kid that felt on the outside and felt a need to explore and connect, especially the spiritual aspect. Like growing up as a kid, a Catholic and an altar boy, and my mom was just quite dysfunctional emotionally, and I would have to get myself up in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning and trudge down to the church to be an altar boy at the age of 8, 9, 10. And it was in this kind of a spiritual seeking, I guess, from a very, very young age, that I was looking for some truths, I guess. Again, either fortunately or unfortunately, I was born with a good mind. I say fortunately because it exposes yourself to a lot of different thoughts. Unfortunately, because you see so much. And when you grow up in an environment that is lacking in love and so on, you see things maybe that you put 2 and 2 together and maybe get 5, and you have to live with this mind that you have. But as time progressed, then the writing of poetry, I kind of dabbled here and there, and then when I got to university, I got serious about it and started to write quite prolifically and publish in local news, university papers and stuff. And then went for a long period of time where I went into education. I remember speaking to one of the university professors. I went to visit my Shakespeare University professor in English. And he said, if you want to write, don't become a teacher. But I became a teacher. And so for 40, 35 years, all I did was write, from a psychologist viewpoint, reports and studies and working on the academic aspect. When I turned 55, I started thinking about retirement, and then went into a bit of a crash, and everything fell apart in my life. And so I went back to work for 2 more years, and then decided that was enough. And then I headed for the hills of Costa Rica, packed up everything I had that was left after I sold and gave away everything. And for those 2 years, I said, okay, now I'm going to write. That writing had actually started during my therapy for a mental breakdown, and I went step by step, sort of journaling through poetry. I went back to the fields of poetry and started journaling my feelings as I went through this program. And this program was 18 weeks long, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. So it was very intensive. And when after I came out of that, I was sort of half healed. At least I had some strategies on how to deal with stress. But was going into the hills of Costa Rica, where I started to meditate and started to become mindfully aware of my environment. And again, for the first time in my life, I actually fell in love with myself. At least fell in, accepted myself as a person who had a right to have their own life and be their own self. And that's where I really got into the writing aspect. And so the writing then, the real writing of the books that I've written occurred pretty well during my therapy and the time after my therapy when I started to journal my thoughts.
So was it the environment in Costa Rica? Was the intention to go there in order to heal? What was it, do you think, that brought you from the place of where you packed up everything you had and dispersed of it and dispensed it of it and let it go, to finding this place within you where you liked and loved yourself? What would you say the ingredients were to go from a place where you said you had this breakdown and then you went away? What do you think was some of those steps that go? Was it the poetry itself? Was it just being in this? Tell us what that was, what the steps were,
It
or
was the poetry itself. It was, as I mentioned, the 18 weeks of therapy gave me some strategies, but it didn't heal my mind. My particular condition is called borderline personality disorder, in which you have not only a wounded self, but you actually have no self, no sense of self whatsoever. Your self becomes a reflection of what others around you. And so this was a journey into myself that started during therapy. And then, like I said, the 2 years, and I said, hey, I'm ready now to really heal. And that's why I went to Costa Rica, and I did the healing through spiritual activities. But it was the journaling that kind of held everything together and took me from one place to another. You and I have gone through a series on my first book on me actually having the courage to read aloud my poetry,
yeah.
which was, again, this whole aspect of finding your voice. And finding your voice is really finding yourself. There's a real holy, I would say, spiritual connection between your voice and yourself. And when you start to find that voice and you start to explore the possibility that, hey, I'm okay.
Right.
I have something to say. And,
Right.
and that's when I started to write seriously.
Mm-hmm. And you've also talked about writing poetry with meaning. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, poetry with purpose, I call it. And
Purpose. Yes. Excuse
two
me.
aspects to that. I do blogging, but I also write articles. And I write articles for a publication called Tide Change, a weekly piece. In that, I look at social situations, and I started off with a poem, and then I give usually, a typical 4 or 5 paragraph write up on where those feelings have led me. So, in other words, poetry with purpose is, okay, we use poetry to focus in on the issues behind the issues, on the feelings, on the sadness, the horror behind the actual facts and pictures that we see. Like, for example, the one I wrote today, which I'm going to submit, is called Little Shoes. And of course, it's about what's happening at the doorsteps of the legislature building and the whole area of our indigenous people and the suffering that they've gone through ever since we arrived on this continent with them. And to me, it's a time to say, okay, let's step back for a minute. These little shoes have a story to tell. What is the story about the little shoes? What is the thing behind, the feelings, the emotions, the truth behind these little shoes that we as a nation need to digest, and let it soak into our spirits and begin to make those significant changes that can bring these people into the mainstream and stop the hurting, basically. So poetry with purpose to me is that aspect. And the second aspect of poetry with purpose is the purpose of finding ourselves, the purpose of going inside that sacred place within us where truth lives. And once we go inside and find our inner truth, that truth, I like to call it as a triangle, this our truth with the universal truth, with your truth. And we form this like triangle, which I call the truth, the purpose, our life purpose, the purpose of why conscious people are here on this earth is to share this truth with other people, regardless of the form that we chose to use or the content we chose to use. There's that truth that underlies everything.
Yes, yes. So this is the universal truth that you're talking about? Like we all have our own objective or personal truth, but you're talking about a universal truth that connects us?
That's a very interesting question because the universal truth I've come to realize is made up of your truth and my truth and everybody else's truth. That is the universal truth. It's just this wonderful energy that's out there that invites us to partake and participate. And
right.
when we partake and participate, love flourishes and all the other wonderful energies like peace and joy and compassion.
So how would you say poetry in for people who haven't written poetry before? You that came to you very young, and even at university where so many people are just so focused on their academics, and obviously you were too. You you excelled and you became a psychologist, but poetry was something that was like the glue for you, it seems. Tell us about what would you like to say about that, the poetry, which is different than prose, and you write prose as well. So how is it different?
Well, poetry to me is a combination of a few things. One is, of course, content. And content to me is, we have to go beyond this sort of gushing out of negative thoughts and feelings and throwing images on a page and expecting our readers, our people to be able to connect our loosely connected images, which I found during university. I thought, poetry is above all communication. And I think, at least from my own viewpoint, from where I grew up, the poetry I see is losing connection with common people. It's become kind of a little genre for people who are poets to sort of share their ideas and so on. And we've lost touch with the common people. So my poetry is mainly in very easy terms. It's very communication. It's conversational. There may be rhymes. There may be poetry. There may be meter. But through it all, one line goes to the next line, to the next line, to create a thought, and hopefully with a punchline in the last stanza about where that thought has led us. So in other words, I want to use my poetry as a connection to people in order to provide a truth. And that means I have to be able to communicate with them in a way that they can listen, and the way they can read, and the way they can feel what I feel and see what I see.
You know, I love what you're saying so much, because I mean, I know your poetry and I think your poetry is brilliant, and I'm going to put you on the spot in a few minutes and I'm going to ask you if you'd like to read some. But I so appreciate the kind of poetry, or the way in which you write poetry, because it isn't abstract. It isn't something where I won't know what you're talking about. I do, and it does speak directly to my heart, and it speaks to my mind. There's something about the way in which you write that I can follow your thread, and it connects to me in a way that I can be uplifted, and I am uplifted, and I always am always astounded by how you punctuate the end. I go, whoa, didn't see that coming. And then it has this way of just rounding it all off, and so there's a direct communication. It's not abstract. And I think that's the kind of poetry I prefer, because I'm not all that great with metaphors, even though I'm a writer. And it's not that your poetry doesn't have metaphors, that it's not just metaphors where I don't really know where you're going. So, but it's a style, and you say it's poetry with purpose. You just talked about a poem you wrote today, Little Shoes. Would you be willing to share it?
It'd take me a minute to find it, but I'd be delightful to share it, yes.
So Lawrence, thank you for being willing to read your poem, Little Shoes, and at an extraordinary time of shame, really, in this country for what's recently happened, where the discovery of all of these children, young children, were, burial sites that were at the residential schools. And so this is a really appropriate poem right now, Little Shoes. Thank you.
I'd like to preface it first by saying that a little something I say at the beginning of each presentation, something that can become a root, sort of kind of an automatic, but I really feel it. I am grateful and honored to live, work, and play in the water, on the land, and through the forests that are the unceded territory of the Comox, Aiskan, and Pentlatch people. I don't think we should ever forget that this was their land before we took it away from them. The poem, Little Shoes on the Steps of the Legislature. Little shoes quietly appear on my government's doorstep. Little bare brown feet silently walk through foreign halls. They haunt the house of laws that devalued them and callously confined and assigned them to a tragic death. Long black hair that flowed in the wind as they ran. Eyes condemned and chalked as dirty and infected, abandoned on cold wooden floors. Little hands stripped of their possessions, the sacred symbols of their people, hold on to empty promises. Little brown bodies stripped and scrubbed, sanitized by sincere but harsh holy hands, lose their otherness. Little brown bodies in white shirts and blue pants sit wordlessly in hard wooden desks and feel naked. Little brown minds that knew how to laugh and play learn meaningless facts in a foreign tongue and grow silent. Little hearts stripped of their source of love, scrutinized in disdain by foreign hearts, feel only hate. little brown souls racked by white disease, without the healing power of their traditions, lie quietly dying. Little bodies lie buried in unmarked graves, 1,000 miles from home, and cry out in silence. So many little shoes sit on the steps of the house of my forefathers. For a sacred moment, I'm able to feel the anguish of little souls that once walked these sacred ocean shores and forest paths of this blessed land we both have cherished and loved.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for giving your voice to these voiceless souls. Yeah, there are no words. I have no words. It's, I think anybody with a heart can, and tunes into the truth of what has happened to these beautiful people. And ever since the aftermath of the residential schools that is still plaguing the Indigenous people today, that there's no excuse, and we need to step up, all of us together as a nation, to respect and pay homage in a way that their sacred ceremonies and language and hearts and medicine is revered and used and brought back. That's my prayer. So thank you.
We are arrogant to believe that our way of life is superior. There's so much beauty in the old culture, and unfortunately, like I've lived on reserves for 2 years. I've taught on reserve schools, not the residential, but reserve schools, and I've taught in communities where I've been an administrator and welcomed children, and they've come to my school, Native kids. I have adopted a Native kid. He's 50 years old now, but love him dearly. And there's an arrogance that we have, and unfortunately, the culture, a lot of the old culture is dying, and I really want us as a nation to get behind the Native peoples, the Indigenous peoples' efforts to rebuild their culture again, so they can offer it to us. Get away from this materialism and start to love the land and the sea that we are part of.
That we are privileged to be on.
Yes, privilege.
Yes. Oh, from your words, your magnificent, beautiful words and heart to the universal God's ears, so that, yes, every single person across the planet learns to respect each other.
Yes, all the Indigenous peoples of this land have so much to teach us if we would get off our horse and start to listen.
Yes. Well, that's all we can do is pray and find the ways in which, we had no idea when this interview started today that this would be something, and possibly even an essential theme of it. We had no idea. You mentioned that you wrote a poem today, and of the little shoes, and I thought, oh my gosh, I would like to hear that. And so there's one thing about you talking about poetry and how it's moved you throughout your life and how it's healed you, and that you've already written 3 books of poetry and have become a poet laureate. It's another thing to experience the poetry coming from the poet's mouth. And so that's a true honor that you've given us. And I'd like to, we're not wrapping this up yet, but later I would like to even ask you if there's another poem that you would like to share with us. But let's move forward, because the poetry is obviously something that has been, and the writing has been a huge part of your life in the healing. As a psychologist, and you talk about your own diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, where there isn't a self, and some people claim, or some diagnostics, how do you say that word? The people who diagnose people say that with borderline personality disorder, there's no real cure. There's, there'll always be that empty place that there's never filled. I mean, to me, some of these DSM, where are we at now? The DSM 2, 3, 4, 5 manual that have all of these pathologies of whatever. I mean, you found differently. You have gone beyond what diagnosis prognosis would be for that particular psychiatric diagnosis, to find peace and harmony and love and joy and beauty in your life. What can you say to that, please?
For one thing, I'll never say anything is impossible to a person who has the spiritual resources of the entire universe. I mean, anything is possible. For when we look at borderline personality disorder, which is one of a whole host of other personality disorders, which is one of a whole host of other disorders. They're disorders. Disorders means they're out of order. And thank God, thank the universe, I put it back in order again. And I'll always have those traits. If I let myself go, if I choose not to enrich my life with daily meditation and to be mindful minute by minute of this world, I have these traits that, by golly, it doesn't take very much. I'm right down the path again. But I can tell the triggers, and I can say, hey, no, I'm better than that. I'm a conscious person, consciously in control of my own life. And today I choose to live in victory, and I choose to live in joy. And I do that every day. I start every day off by doing that. And every day when I see myself feeling like something negative, maybe my wife has said something, and oh boy, here we go again. And I'm into self-pity. Hold on a minute, I don't have to do that. I don't. And so I walk over to her, give her a hug, give her a kiss on the cheek, and say, I love you. And we go on from there. And it's not just kissing and hugging my wife, it's everything in life. Everything in life. We just give it up and say, thanks for reminding me that I am consciously on the path to love and joy and peace. And that's conscious living.
That is conscious living. And as you know, I'm certainly vocal about my own diagnosis of bipolar, and it is absolutely a choice. And so my life does not represent anything like it used to years ago, because I found tools, and they keep me happy and grounded and resilient. And it is an absolute daily choice as to what I choose to think about, where I choose to focus my thoughts and my energy, and how I choose to respond to the situations in my life. So it's right. So it's, maybe I still do have some chemical thing going on. I don't know, but I know I'm in charge. I know that there are tools, just like you said. So it's not rocket science. It's what something every single human being upon the planet can do. We get a choice of how we want to respond to our situation. And if we want to find harmony and balance and look forward to a today, which that is filled with goodness, then we need to practice those things, which will ensure tomorrow will too, and the next day as well.
Yes.
Because it's not like life isn't going to happen and there aren't going to be challenges. That's not part of this earth planet. We're here and we experience losses and we experience everything, but it is a choice. So thank you about that. So, so you have written a nonfiction book on your borderline personality disorder. So tell us about that and how it's, where does it fit in the total body of your published book?
It's rather recent. I do a blog, another blog, and it's about my other struggle, which is my first book, which is learning to live with my sexual orientation, which unfortunately was all wrapped up in my disorder. One of the facts that very few people know, well, two facts that I find absolutely profound, is that people with borderline personality disorder are 10 times more likely to commit suicide than people with just depression. It is the single most factor in depression in our world today. And it's not only the suicide, it's the risk taking, and the risk taking is overdosing and all of those things that we are in an epidemic. And the other fact is that 1/3 of people with borderline personality disorder also happen to be bisexual. And that's not even looking into the other side of it. Nobody's, got a hold of all the people with bisexual who have bisexuality tendencies and say, do you also have borderline personality disorder? Which I think would be more than 1/3, quite frankly, because the people that I've met who are bisexual, well, there are two kinds. There's the ones that have got it together. And they're usually the more aggressive, more assertive, more confident, and probably don't have borderline personality disorder. And then there's the other side where there's really a struggle, a daily struggle to control impulses. And along with those impulses, feeding the borderline personality disorder and feeding tendencies towards depression and generalized anxiety and committing suicide and drug escape, So that was a long introduction to the book, which is, you mentioned the DSM-5. So what I did, I tore that part apart on the borderline personality disorder from the DSM-5, identified 13 what they call impairments. In other words, dysfunction, 13 things that cause dysfunction. I went through each of those, wrote a paragraph on each, starting off with a poem, of course, and then talking about my personal experience, talking about, and this is something which you mentioned earlier, which I like to bring out at this point, is that the gratitude, there's an aha in there, okay, this is me, this is my experience, but there's this something I can be grateful out of this, something that I can use to make myself even better. And I think that's the key about appreciating your journey, my journey. We can look back and say, I am so thankful to the universal spirit for rescuing me out of this miserable life that I had. I know the depths of despair that can come from living in that kind of life. And now I can experience this amazing gratitude, not only for the life I now have, but for those things that made me into the person I am now. So back to the book, then the last thing is 5 suggestions what you can do to overcome this particular impairment. So I haven't pushed it. I have to revise it. And I've just sort of published it, put it on Amazon, but I haven't done anything with it. I've just sort of put it there that I'll go back and touch it up again. Because there's one thing about writing, any kind of writing, is we are evolving people.
Right.
And like how many times have I revised my book, my book, Enchanted With Life, with a new one that I'm writing, Magic of Love. I mean, one of the beautiful things about writing is every time you go back and revise, you grow. And every time you grow, you go back and revise, and you evolve this piece of writing so that it says your truth,
Right.
a
And
truth that you can share with someone else.
so true. And it's interesting because some people, the paradox of that is some people will feel, oh my gosh, if I write that, that means that it's, you know, uh, it's created in stone, and that's the way it's going to be forever. But that's just not the truth. It's, you know, I'll look at things that I've written and I've published years ago, and I think, oh, I have a different idea about that now. And like you say, every time you go back and you revise something, it's another, oh, I've got this to add and I've got this to add. At a certain point, it's like this painting behind me that, you know, that David beautifully painted. There's a point where you put down your pen, you put down your paintbrush, and you know that that's that for now. But we are all growing and evolving, and so things change as ideas. We sift that energy inside of us around and have new awarenesses. But that is the beauty of the craft.
Yes, that's the beauty of writing, because you put it in a place where you can see it again, and you come back, you see it again and say, oh yeah, that's the way I felt 2 years ago. But you know, it's not I've added to that.
Yeah, exactly. So you talk about living a life of purpose, and that we, you know, need to live a life of purpose as we grow throughout the different stages of our life. So what does that mean for you at this particular stage of life for you?
That's a very interesting question, because it's right now, it's sort of where I'm at, you know. And yes, I want to publish. Yes, I want to get my work out to people, and I'm taking steps to do that. But I don't want to spend all my time working on getting my work out to people, you know. So I found a beautiful person, the same beautiful person you found, who's willing to do that for me. And right now I feel light.
Oh gosh, yeah, yay India. I don't mind using
But this whole process, then it frees me to write, and I've come to the point, you know, okay, I've done my academic things, and I want to do my academic things because they're important. I'm in the process of putting together these 4 stages of actual self-actualization, which I call virtues. I've divided it into the grounding virtues, and then the centering virtues, and then the compassionate virtues, and finally the last virtue, to me, where what I've learned so much through my present wife, you know, is that if I can't love her unconditionally, I can't love anybody else, because she is so wonderful. And so I'm perfecting my love for her, both from the feelings and from the manifestation of it. And I think this is where I want to leave people, and where I want my poetry and my writing to go to, is saying, first of all, learn to love one person really, really well. And then, you know, maybe you can expand to love others. And go step one farther. In my own personal journey, I would say that if I hadn't learned to really, really love myself, I would never have found my wife. I would never have found the person I have now, because it's that love for myself which shows up in confidence and shows up in desire to love, and having something to offer to love, which attracted me to her, and her to me. And this is where I want to leave people. Learn to love yourself, and then learn to love one other person really well, and then grow from there.
That's a beautiful, beautiful message. It really is. And I agree. I think that first we need to love ourselves, learn to really, really, you know, that sounds almost like a cliche, but it is so true. We have to like ourselves, love ourselves, give ourselves pardon for the things that we may have done wrong, right? To know that if our hearts were in the right place, we would have done it differently had we had the tools to do it differently.
Yes.
And just love those parts of us that still feel guilty or afraid or nervous or whatever. We're just evolving beings one step at a time, and to just cut
Exactly.
ourselves a whole lot of slack and know that that we are beautiful and are deserving of love. And the more we give that to our little kid inside of us and all the stages of growth of, of that one inside that wants to be shy or afraid to start coming out into the light. And I agree, the more I know that with my relationship right now, I've been blessed with people who've wanted to love me, but I have never, ever wanted to love somebody the way I love this man. And it's one thing, and it's magnificent to feel love from someone, but to feel that you just want to give love to someone, to wake up and think, how can I make this person happy today? What would make a difference? It's a whole different reframe. And I know that the two of us met at a time when we were the best, the highest expression of ourselves. It wouldn't have worked another time. I would have been judging him for everything because that was my pattern. And why? Because it's how I judge myself.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Right?
I want to add one thing to what you said there. I agree totally with what you said. I want to add one thing, is that I had to learn to let her love me. I had to learn to receive, to accept that love, because all through my life, I'm not worthy of loving just for me. I'm only worthy of being loved if I do things for some other person. But now I can sit back, and when she says, I love you, I can
take it in.
I can say, thank you. That feels good. That feels good. And we gotta let the other people love us. And we are worthy. We are worthy of that love. That's the thing.
Well, that's it. And how often do we reflect it? I mean, those of us who have been so graced with someone to love us and to love, thank you, God. And there are, countless people on the planet that are alone. And so it doesn't have to be a special relationship. Let one person, a special friend, a child, whatever that person is, whoever that is. I think that it doesn't have to be within the confines of a romantic relationship. How wonderful it is that it is about letting someone in.
It doesn't have to be, but when it happens, don't feel guilty because other people don't have it. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
I get that you do.
I do. Yes, I do.
Would you like to
Can't tell you how good it feels to let myself be loved and feel loved.
Well, Lawrence, you deserve it. How many years ago was it when we were writing? I was helping you, coaching you with your first book. Well, not your first book, but your first book. Well, it wasn't the first psychological book, but it was your book on that it was so scary for you to read your poems out loud. It was 6, 7 years ago or something, to read your you walked into my office as we were strangers, and it took so much courage, and look how far you've come in this time. And it's just a beautiful pleasure, joy to see your involvement.
Yes. And one of the things that I've, you mentioned, what do I see in purpose for the near future? And one thing I really want to do more of now that COVID is getting over is to share not only my words through the book, but to share my spirit through verbal and visual presentations with an audience, with 10, 20 people around. And where one of the things that I learned from you is that my emotions are okay. I don't have to be ashamed of them. If my voice cracks, I don't have to be ashamed of myself for my voice cracking. That emotion is what makes me real, what makes my thoughts, even my words real. If it comes through my written words, fine. But when it comes through my spoken words, it releases part of me. so that if you're in the room with me, you can feel a vibration, a sensation pass through your body, probably. And that's what I want to do in the years coming.
Well, Lawrence, I'm holding that vision with you. And I agree with you that I believe poetry needs to be read out loud, and other kinds of passages, and our words need to be spoken and heard. And when we can do it live in a live room with people, what the energy that you wrote those words with, the soul, the energy, the the inspiration and everything that came through you, that found itself its way through the pen and onto the page that you are delivering, is what people will receive firsthand, right there in their own very own body, their hearts, their souls. You transmit that. And so I see you in front of audiences of hundreds, thousands. Why limit it? You know, at some point, I mean, you are a poet laureate. There's thousands and thousands of people in the Comox Valley. Now that COVID's over, or it's not over, and we pray that it will be worldwide, that as it starts to, the shutdown starts to, I can't think of the words, I'm not articulating this very well, but as the restrictions, that's the word I was thinking of, start to lift, then I'm hoping that you will step into the role that you were nominated for, in terms of bring those people in to hear those words. Let them hear little, shoes, everything. And speaking of which, is there one more poem that you would like to share with us today that represents who you are today?
Yes. Okay. This is the sort of the introductory poem to my new book, The Magic of Love. And of course, it is called The Magic of Love. And it's, about, again, love between two people. The magic of love. Magic is in the air where you walk, where you breathe. When I walk the path you walk, I absorb your magic and gently let it course through my heart and stream into the lifeblood of my soul. Each day is a new day. Each day is another day with you to explore the wonders of our own private universe that we have created thoughtfully, mindfully, setting aside the needs of our body and the trials of our minds. We give our souls center stage and play out our roles in this human drama with power and passion. And then the magic begins to flow. It erases every pain of mind and body. It soars on the lifts where land meets sea, and we rise like eagles in the warmth of the morning's sun.
We rise like eagles in the warmth of the morning sun. What an image. Thank you, Lawrence, for your beautiful poetry, your soul, your story, for sharing with us some of what makes Lawrence Cooper tick, of who you are as this very, very beautiful human being who traversed a tremendous amount of pain to now be a leader in how we can do that. That you did it. Everyone has the same opportunity for choice, no matter what their diagnosis. So I thank you so much. And yeah.
You're welcome. And I can honestly accept your thanks as the way it is and the way it's felt. And I'm so thankful that I can be thankful.
Me too. Bless you. Bye for now.
Goodbye.